Imagine a man who writes beautifully about the poison of wealth while accumulating one of the largest fortunes in Rome. A man who warns you with devastating precision about the corrupting influence of power while whispering into the ear of an emperor. A man who teaches that the wise person fears nothing and yet spends decades afraid of the man he helped raise. This is Lucius Annaeus Seneca, Stoic philosopher, playwright, statesman, advisor to Nero, and arguably the most contradictory, most fascinating, most human thinker the ancient world ever produced. And here's the thing nobody tells you about Seneca. His contradictions aren't what make him a fraud. They are what make him worth listening to. Seneca was born around 4 BC in Cordoba, a Roman provincial city in what is now southern Spain. He wasn't born into the imperial elite of Rome itself, which meant he had to earn his place in a world obsessed with lineage and blood. His father, Seneca the Elder, was a scholar of rhetoric, a man deeply invested in the life of the mind, and that intellectual inheritance shaped everything that followed. The family moved to Rome when Seneca was still a boy, and Rome, at that time, was the center of the known universe. A city of 1 million people, seething with ambition, politics, and spectacle, and excess. Seneca was educated in the finest tradition of Roman philosophy, studying Stoicism, Pythagoreanism, and the rhetorical arts. He was sharp, exceptionally sharp. So sharp, in fact, that the Emperor Caligula reportedly grew jealous of his brilliance in the Senate and nearly had him executed, only relenting because someone convinced Caligula that Seneca was already dying of tuberculosis and would be dead soon enough on his own. Which brings us to something essential about Seneca that almost nobody talks about. His body was always trying to kill him. From a young age, Seneca suffered from severe respiratory illness, what he described as a kind of suffocation that would come in waves. He had asthma, likely worsened by the infamous air of ancient Rome, thick with smoke and filth. There were moments, he wrote, where he genuinely believed each breath might be his last. And this is where philosophy stopped being an intellectual game for Seneca and became something urgent, something survival level. When you live close to death, you stop asking what is a good life as an abstract question. You start asking it the way a drowning man asks for air. His illnesses forced him into long periods of rest, retreat, and reflection. And out of those retreats came some of the most penetrating moral writing in Western history. His letters to Lucilius, his essays on the shortness of life, on anger, on the happy life. Pages that still hit like cold water to the face 2,000 years later. But the philosopher's life is rarely clean. In 41 AD, under the Emperor Claudius, Seneca was exiled to the island of Corsica. The charge was almost certainly fabricated, alleged adultery with the emperor's niece. The real reason was almost certainly political. And so Seneca, the Stoic who preached equanimity and acceptance, was ripped from Rome, from his career, from everything he'd built, and dropped into a windswept island in the Mediterranean. He stayed there for 8 years. 8 years. He wrote letters home that oscillated between genuine Stoic acceptance and barely disguised despair. He was human. He struggled. And perhaps that's the most important thing we can say about him. He didn't perform philosophy. He wrestled with it. In 49 AD, Agrippina the Younger, mother of the boy who would become Nero, had Seneca recalled from exile. She had plans. She wanted a brilliant tutor for her son, someone who could shape a future emperor's mind. Seneca accepted. And in doing so, he walked into the most dangerous room he would ever enter. For years, Seneca served as Nero's advisor, tutor, and arguably the most stabilizing influence on what started as a promising reign. He wrote Nero's early speeches. He worked alongside the general Burrus to restrain the emperor's more impulsive instincts. By some accounts, the early years of Nero's rule, known as the Quinquennium Neronis, were among the best years of Roman governance in a generation. Seneca's influence, many historians argue, was the reason Nero grew darker. The mother he had always feared and resented, he had murdered. The former wife discarded. The advisors who restrained him gradually pushed aside. And Seneca, brilliant, wealthy, now dangerously visible, found himself increasingly isolated. He tried to retire. He offered to return his wealth. Nero refused, not out of generosity, but because keeping Seneca close meant keeping him controlled. In 65 AD, a conspiracy to assassinate Nero, the Pisonian conspiracy, collapsed. Nero used it as a purge. Whether Seneca was actually involved is still debated by historians. It didn't matter. Nero sent a soldier to Seneca's villa with a simple message: "You are to die." Seneca's response has become one of the most haunting scenes in all of ancient history. He gathered his friends around him, comforted them. The man condemned to death, comforting the living. He tried to open his veins, his circulation, weak from years of illness, made it slow and agonizing. He dictated final thoughts to scribes. He asked for poison. And finally, he was carried into a steam bath where he suffocated. The same suffocation he had spent his whole life describing. Breath by breath confrontation with death, arriving at last in full. He died as he had written, not perfectly, but honestly. Let's not look away from the obvious. Seneca was extraordinarily wealthy. At his peak, he possessed estates across the empire, thousands of slaves, and a fortune estimated by some historians at 300 million sesterces, a number so vast, it's almost meaningless, except to say that it represented the kind of wealth that distorts reality for the person holding it. And yet, this man was writing. It is not the man who has too little who is poor, but the man who hankers after more. This was the man warning against the seduction of luxury while dining on plates of silver, advising emperors about the dangers of unchecked power while depending on that power for his very own survival. The ancient critics noticed Publius Sullius, one of Seneca's political enemies, attacked him publicly. How did he accumulate such fortune in just 4 years of royal favor? What kind of wisdom is this, precisely, that generates villas and vineyards while preaching renunciation? It's a fair question, and Seneca, to his credit, never really answered it cleanly. What he did say was this: the wise man can live among beautiful things without being enslaved by them. That the problem isn't the gold cup, it's whether you can set it down. That philosophy isn't a vow of poverty, it's a vow of clarity. Whether you believe him is up to you, but here's the deeper question, one worth sitting with. Does a teacher need to perfectly embody their lessons for those lessons to be true? When a doctor tells you to stop smoking, the advice doesn't become false if the doctor smokes. When a parent warns their child about addiction, the warning isn't hollow just because the parent carries their own. We are, all of us, at some distance from our own best knowledge. We know things we cannot fully live. We see truth we cannot fully reach. Seneca was perhaps the most honest about that distance. He wrote explicitly about his own failures. He described his anger, his fear, his weakness. He said repeatedly that he was not writing as a sage looking down from a mountain. He was writing as a fellow patient from inside the same illness. I am not so shameless, he wrote, as to offer cures while I am sick myself. That, I think, is not the voice of a fraud. That is the voice of someone genuinely in the struggle, brilliant enough to see the ideal, honest enough to admit the gap. Now I want to bring you to a specific letter, letter 7 of the letters to Lucilius. Because what Seneca writes here is so precise, so uncomfortably accurate, that reading it today feels less like ancient history and more like he's describing your social media feed. Seneca attended the gladiatorial games. This wasn't unusual. The games were the great communal ritual of Roman life. The Super Bowl, and the evening news, and the political rally all fused into one spectacle of blood and sand. He went during the lunch break, expecting something lighter. What he found instead was slaughter. Criminals executed wholesale, the crowd screaming for more. And here's what shook him. Not the violence itself, but what happened inside him as he sat there. He felt it, the pull, the crowd's energy seeping into him like dye into cloth. The bloodlust, the cheering, the savage exhilaration. He could feel himself beginning to align with it. His emotions, without his choosing it, were starting to match the room. He left, and he wrote about it, with the clear-eyed unease of a man who has seen something true about human nature that he wishes weren't true. Associating with the crowds, he wrote, is harmful. There is no person who does not make some vice attractive to us, or stamp it upon us, or taint us unconsciously. Think about what he's describing. This is emotional contagion, the invisible transmission of mood, attitude, and behavior through group proximity. Modern psychology has confirmed it repeatedly. Humans are deeply biologically susceptible to the emotional states of those around them. We sync, we mirror, we absorb. And a crowd doesn't just amplify emotion, it transforms it. It strips away individual accountability. It offers anonymity. It creates a shared identity that overrides personal conscience. Psychologists call it de-individuation. Seneca called it a disease. Both are right. Now fast forward 2,000 years. You're scrolling. You didn't mean to. You picked up the phone for 30 seconds. But 30 seconds became 15 minutes. And now you're reading a thread about something that happened to someone you've never met, in a place you've never been. And you are furious. Your hands are slightly tense. Your jaw is set. The comments are piling up. Hundreds of people agreeing with each other, sharpening each other's outrage like whetstone on steel. You are at the gladiatorial games. The arena is just digital now. The sand are the pixels. But the crowd is still there, and it is still infectious, and you are still, without meaning to, starting to align with its energy. Seneca's warning is so surgically accurate, it should make you stop scrolling today. The crowd doesn't ask your permission before it changes you. It doesn't announce what it's doing. It simply does it, slowly, through repetition, through immersion, through the accumulated weight of 1,000 small alignments you never consciously chose. This is why he wrote, "Withdraw into yourself as much as you can." Not as a prescription for antisocial hermitage, but as a recognition that the self, your actual self, the one capable of reasoning and choosing and living, is fragile. It needs protection. And one of the things it needs most protection from is the crowd that offers you the intoxicating warmth of belonging in exchange for your independent judgment. Cancel culture, outrage mobs, the viral pylons that erupt every week, consuming someone in a flood of coordinated contempt before the next one begins. These are the crowds. They feel like justice, and sometimes they are, but they are still crowds, and crowds are still capable of the bloodlust Seneca watched in the Colosseum. The mechanism is identical. Only the arena has changed. Ask yourself, when you joined the last online outrage, did you decide to? Or did the crowd decide it for you? Seneca wrote extensively about friendship, and here too he cuts against the grain of his world and ours. Roman elite culture, like our own, was saturated with what we would today call networking. Strategic alliances, patronage relationships, carefully managed social connections designed to advance position and accumulate influence. You cultivated the right people. You performed loyalty. You exchanged favors like currency. Seneca looked at all of this and said, that is not friendship. That is transaction. And transaction will leave you profoundly alone. His definition of true friendship was extraordinary and demanding. A real friend, he wrote, is someone you can speak to as freely as you speak to yourself. Someone with whom you share not just dinner tables and letters of recommendation, but the unedited truth of your inner life, your fears, failures, your genuine thoughts about the mortality and meaning. Someone who has become, as he put it, another self. Treat your inferiors as you would want to be treated by your superiors, he wrote. And then elsewhere, more pointedly, before you tell a friend all of your concerns, you must first decide whether he truly is a friend. Real friendship for Seneca required virtue, not performed virtue, actual virtue. Because a person without integrity cannot be trusted with your truth. And a relationship where you cannot be truthful is not a friendship. It is a cage with better furniture. Think about your own relationships right now. How many of them would you classify by Seneca's standard as real? How many people exist in your life with whom you could sit? No performance, no image management, no crafted version of yourself, and speak freely about what actually terrifies you. About the way your life isn't matching your expectations. About the grief you've been carrying for years that you haven't named out loud to anyone. Modern life has industrialized connection while gutting intimacy. We have follower counts. We have LinkedIn networks. We have group chats that buzz with memes and never once speak of anything that actually really matters. We are hyper-connected and profoundly agonizingly alone. Seneca would not be surprised. He would simply say, "You have confused the quantity of contact with the quality of communion, and those are not the same thing." He wrote to Lucilius, one actual friend, across hundreds of letters spanning years, with a depth and intellectual honesty that most of us never bring to any relationship in our lives. Those letters are themselves a demonstration of what he was preaching. Not the performance of friendship, but the practice of it. Hard, imperfect, real. Let me bring you, finally, to the teachings themselves, the ones that traveled cleanest across the centuries. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." Read that again. Not once in recorded history has the future gone exactly as feared. The catastrophe you spent 3 weeks dreading arrived differently than you imagined, or didn't arrive at all, or arrived and you survived it anyways. And yet, and this is the part Seneca finds almost comic, we will do it again next week. We will build elaborate architecture out of anxiety, furnish it with detail, move in, and live there in genuine suffering over something that has not happened and may never happen at all. This is not weakness. It's just the human condition. But it is also, he insists, a choice. Perception is not a passive reception. It is an act, and you can train it. This is what the Stoics meant by mastering perception. Not toxic positivity, not denial, but the deliberate practice of examining what you have actually decided about a situation versus what the situation objectively contains. The traffic jam is not a personal attack. The critical email is not proof of your worthlessness. The discomfort is not evidence of catastrophe. On time, he was merciless. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a good deal of it. We are not, he argued, victims of a short life. We are, most of us, voluntary accomplices in its squandering. Every hour fed to distraction, to performance, to the frantic accumulation of things that don't matter, that hour is gone, not paused, gone. Doom scrolling, hours dissolving into content you won't even remember tomorrow. The performance of a life on social media instead of actually living one. Seneca wrote on the shortness of life in roughly 49 AD. He could not have imagined the iPhone, and yet he described it perfectly. On status and luxury, he didn't say it was wrong to have things. He said it was dangerous to need them. The moment your sense of self becomes dependent on the house, the car, the title, the number of people who admire you, you have handed sovereignty over your own life to external forces. And external forces do not care about you. They shift. They vanish. They are taken away. He is a great man who uses earthen vessels like silver, but he is equally great who uses silver like earthen vessels. The object matters less than your relationship to it. And on death, here he was most radical, most consistent, and most free. Death is not the enemy of life, he argued. Fear of death is the enemy of life, because fear of death is the invisible tax we pay on every hour, the thing that makes us small and cautious and frantic in our grasping. Stoics didn't ask you to be indifferent to death. They asked you to look at it clearly, without flinching, until you understood that a life lived well doesn't need to be long, and a life lived badly isn't improved by length. Seneca rehearsed his death mentally, constantly, and paradoxically, this practice made him more alive. When you have genuinely accepted that today might be sufficient, when you have genuinely reckoned with the fact the story ends, you stop postponing your actual life in favor of some imagined future version that will finally be worthy of your full attention. The full attention is available now. Seneca was not a saint. He was not a perfect Stoic. He was wealthy when he shouldn't have been, complicit when he should have refused, silent when he should have spoken. I want to suggest something. The distance between what Seneca knew and how Seneca lived, that gap is not an argument against his philosophy. It is the philosophy. The Stoics never claimed that wisdom was a destination you arrived at, bags unpacked, task complete. They claimed it was a practice, a direction, a compass bearing you orient yourself toward, knowing you will drift, knowing the current is strong, knowing some days you will barely move toward it at all. Seneca knew this better than anyone. He said this explicitly, repeatedly in the letters and essays that have now outlasted the empire that nearly destroyed him. He failed at his own teaching, and he kept teaching anyway. And maybe that is the most Stoic thing of it all. Not the man who never falters, but the man who falls short of the ideal he still refuses to abandon. But let me leave you with this question Seneca would want you to carry out of this room. Right now, in this moment, are you thinking for yourself? Or are you thinking with the crowd? Are your opinions yours? Worked out in the quiet, examined, tested, genuinely held? Or have they been absorbed from the environment around you, from the feeds and the algorithms and the roar of the digital Colosseum? Are the people closest to you actually close? Or are they just nearby? And the hours you have, are you spending them, or are you letting them be taken? Seneca spent 30 years writing about time. And then time ran out. He faced the end with his friends around him, dictating the thoughts into the dark, asking for the pen even as the body failed. The last question he ever had to answer wasn't even philosophical. It was the same one you'll face, the same one we all face. Was it enough? Did I really live it? The terrifying thing and the beautiful thing is that you are still answering that question right now. Non differtur vita transcurrit. Life is not postponed. It passes. If this resonated, if this hit, share it. If you really enjoyed it, smash that subscribe button. Follow me everywhere. We're building something real here. Stay grounded, stay sharp, and stay unshakable.